this notion of feminism is supposed to be about equality and equalism. But when women have the right to do something by going to get sperm, it's okay. But I think when you're going to find guys doing things like using artificial wombs or even surrogates, there's loads and loads and stacks of paperwork. And there's ultimately going to be government involvement, especially for artificial wombs, if that's a thing that becomes a reality in the future. But back to the point of the passport bro thing, sort of building on the idea of that video that I published. That's why women hate it. It's as simple as that. Hot dudes that they want to be with leave and find more feminine, more agreeable women in another country. They get mad about it. So the second part to this is how do guys screw this up? And they really do screw it up a lot. Let me share something here, which is more or less like an expectation of what guys typically want or what they think they're going to get. So this is something that popped up on my feed on Twitter today, and I thought it was relevant. So, just kind of place held it. But essentially, I don't know who this PD guy is, but he said, no twerking, no nudity, no makeup, 3 girls singing a folk song from what I don't know where, throw in a donkey and you're winning. I find these women attractive. Am I the only one? Now, it turns out, I'm just going to play this. I'm not going to run the audio because it turns out these 3 girls are very popular. They have a massive YouTube channel with over 1 million subs. So there's going to be copyright issues or, music. I can't remember what they call it, but there's musical infringements, let's just call it. But they sound sweet. They're very pretty, almost no makeup on. They got a donkey in the background and they're dressed in traditional clothing. Like this is the lie, I think, and I'm going to call it a lie right now, but this is the lie that guys sign up for when they go down the passport bro road, because this seems very attractive. Super feminine women. I don't see any rainbows. I don't see any purple hair dye, face piercings, exposed tattoos, loads of skin. They certainly don't maneuver and act, promiscuous. Like this guy said over here, there's no twerking, none of that stuff. They're just walking along, singing a relatively pleasant song, enjoying themselves. Like they're not 10s, but they're very attractive, by Western standards, especially in North America, which is what most guys are dealing with. I mean, somebody posted this the other day on Twitter, but I think the average weight of a North American woman now is something like 170 pounds plus. So it's right up there, right? So this is what's been sold, right? Pack your bag, get your passport, go out here and win, and go and get a girl like this. And everybody's got their preferences. Some guys prefer Latin women, some guys prefer Asian women, but there's preferences that everybody express. But that's generally where it ends up going. So I'm going to call it a lie right now. I'm going to explain why, if you bear with me on this. So back to that video with the whole passport bro status. So I noticed a few of the comments and I sort of bookmarked a few of them. And there was one guy that was, he wasn't being disrespectful or rude, but he was pushing back a little bit. And he was talking about, passport bros and why it's important. And my understanding as I was reading it was that he might have been a passport bro and had some experience to share. So I replied back to him. I said, I clarified the misunderstanding. And I said, look, if you've got experience in this area, I'd love to have you on a podcast and you can talk about it. And I said, just email me. So he emailed me, and my misunderstanding was not incorrect. He went on to talk about his business a little bit, which is cool. And you like my book. Awesome. Thank you. But he said, regarding my passport bro status, I must confess I haven't traveled outside of the US yet. However, I do have a passport, and I'm currently in a relationship with a woman from the Philippines. Never anticipated being in a long distance relationship, but she's in my frame and she aligns with my values. She never asked for money. She doesn't have any children. She is responsible, has a good job, and she's actually coming here to see me. On the other hand, my dating life here at home, I'm still considered average, at least on paper. So of course, I'm constantly working on improving myself because I'm well aware that even average women are not attracted to the average man. And when it comes to attractive women, average men are practically invisible. He goes on to say, therefore, it's refreshing to have someone who I'm genuinely attracted to while striving for excellence. Recently, so he just talks about purchasing his first property, quit drinking, quit smoking weed, and a few other improvements to life, which is cool. So This guy in the comments was holding out, or I was under the impression that he had experience and it was the better way to go, and was kind of pushing back because I made a comment in that video about the passport bro movement. And I'm not a big fan of it just because of the way that guys handle it and how they screw it up. And I'll explain that in a sec. This is kind of a typical example of what I'll see, right? I'm in a long distance relationship with a woman from the Philippines that I've never met, who's in my frame. So you haven't met her. How is she in your frame? How do you know what she's about? How do you know she's loyal to you? How are you in a long distance relationship? Like, I've talked about long distance relationships many times on my channel and other podcasts when people call in and ask about it. And it's not a relationship. You are not in a relationship if there is an absence of intimacy. You might be friends, you might be pen pals, you might have expressed interest, but you're not in a relationship. Now, the truth of the matter is that the attraction for women in some of these countries, like, within Asia, like Philippines would be a good example. Eastern Europe, like those three gals that were playing the little banjo thing or the bouzouki or whatever it might have been there in Georgia, or if it's Latin women, the Colombians or Mexicans or whatever it happens to be. They're still genuinely interested in the best man that they can get. Their hypergamous nature still remains the same. Women are still women. Women in the United States are really not that much different from the women in the Philippines, Georgia, or Colombia. They still want the best guy that they can absolutely get. And comparably speaking, you being in the United States, for example, talking to a gal from the Philippines, you probably look like a better prospect to her than what's available in her immediate dating marketplace. I think this guy mentioned in an earlier paragraph that what he does is he uses an app like Tinder and then switches his geolocation to one of these countries and starts swiping and matching. But you can't be in a you can't be in a relationship if you're long distance. There's a lack of intimacy. Intimacy doesn't exist. It's not a relationship. Okay. So, what do I keep telling you guys? Men love to complicate their lives and justify why they do it. I'm in a relationship with a gal that I've never met who's purportedly in my frame. That's not a relationship. You have expressed interest in a girl and she's talking to you, so she has an interest in you. But there's an underlying notion that coming to a first world country like the United States, that's the dream of everybody outside of the West. They want to come to a Western country to better themselves. Arnold Schwarzenegger is an amazing example of that. There's a documentary on Netflix right now that sort of breaks down his life, and it was like the passion and the amount of work and desire that had to go in for him to leave Austria, that little village, to end up, where he did in the States and marry a Kennedy and become a governor and one of the highest paid actors, in the world. That drive in men is immense. For women, it's a little bit different because they know that their sexuality is their main bargaining position, right? Their beauty, their youth and their beauty is their main bargaining position. And being in a country where women can still be objectively beautiful, but the men don't really bring nearly as much to the table as a guy, even an average guy in the States. Like this guy's saying that he's just an average guy in the States. So she's purportedly choosing him and actively wanting to come over and see him. Great. My advice in scenarios like this where guys are contemplating the passport bro move is go there and stay there. Would be the first thing. Do not bring them back to the West because they will be westernized within a couple of years, and they're going to turn to shit. I'm just telling you, like it is. They're going to adopt Western values. They're going to start consuming the Kool-Aid. They're going to see all the media. They're going to see all the social media, all the new stuff, the rainbows, the wokeness. It's all going to get crammed down their throats. Some of them will probably protest and resist a little bit more than others. But it exists. And, whether it's 1, 2, 3, or 5 years, they will become westernized. Eddie Murphy did two major stand-ups, Delirious and Raw. I can't remember which one it was in. I think it might have been in Raw. But he made this joke about unfufu, which is some African zebra gal that I'm using kinder, friendlier language because Eddie has a way with words. But I encourage you to go to YouTube after this and search for Eddie Murphy unfufu. And this is back in the 80s. And it's the same story back then as what it is today, right? We're talking like 40, 50 years later, right? not 50 years later, but several decades later, obviously, it's still the same dynamic. You know, you think that you can go to a country and bring one of these girls back and they're going to remain feminine and they're going to remain in their like in their place. But what ends up happening is pretty much exactly what happened to that guy that married the Chinese girl in the video that I published on my YouTube channel. A lot of these guys find these women are disagreeable. They find that they hoard the money. They want to control the money. The house is never big enough. The car is never nice enough. They withhold sex. They use sex to manipulate in the relationship. They send a lot of money back home. And culturally, you know, that exists in a lot of cultures, right? Like I know with a lot of Asian cultures, especially, you know, in the Philippines, they will make money here. And the biggest export from North America into the Philippines is just cash. It's just Western unions, generally speaking. I don't know if they use crypto now, but it's a movement of money from North America back home to take care of their family. And that's something that like bugs me, you know, to some degree when people come to a Western country and they still use that language back home, right? Like home is where you are at right now. Like you wanted to leave back home because it was a shithole to come over here, but it's still back home. Like they still call it home. So money still transfers back over that way. I really hope you guys enjoyed that clip. If you want to watch the full length podcast, you can find that over here, that clip's from. If you're newer to the channel, make sure you hit subscribe over here and pin down below in the top comment. You'll find a bunch of useful links to my website, my supplement line, books, and a bunch of other stuff. Have an amazing day. Peace out.